Welcome in, everybody, to another weekly recap where normally Finch and I write the scripts for one another, and Finch and I will read each other's scripts. This week, Finch and I did write the scripts, but GoreMiser is playing the role of Finch this week for the Week 9 recap. It was a fantastic week in the SPL, and Gore will get us started in letting us know how it went.
That's right, the first game we had was a triple header on Friday. SPL games, a doubleheader there for Radiance, who played their first of 3 games this weekend against PK Friday afternoon. This matchup was wildly important for Radiance to get back on track after a 2-game loss streak heading into the set. Unfortunately for Radiance, only 1 game was particularly close, as the Knights blew out Radiance in 2. After a set like this, Dave thinks it's important to focus on good rather than the bad, but luckily it is me, GoreMiser, delivering the bad news. Radiance just looked out of sorts. Specifically in Game 2, you can call them the Migos because they had an offset.
Oh, yeah!
The good news for Radiance is that you can just throw out Game 2 as outplayed. Now the happy news. The Knights looked incredible. They held on in a gritty Game 1 headlined by a fantastic Sobed game for Neil and a resurgent Zapman. For the same reason Radiance want to forget Game 2, the Knights will love to remember a standout game from Cuvo on Camazotz was left largely unchecked by Radiance. Paul surfed his way through Radiance on his signature Hebo, and PK snagged the set win. Dave, you're going to take us through the last 2 matches on Friday.
That's right, the first of the last 2 matches we had on Friday. The last of the regularly scheduled games, I suppose, and I'll handle those, starting with Ghost versus Sanguine. Ghost has been looking as strong as ever lately, while Sanguine have been struggling, to put it lightly. Their top 4 spots, solidified since early in Phase 1, was in jeopardy. Ghosts are among the hardest teams in the league to try and break out of a slump against, but Sanguine sure put in a good effort. Sam's Awilix is dominant in Game 1. PBM is allowed to play Hercules and completely controls the early game. Rongyu tries out Mulan support, but it just gets bullied. Sanguine recovered nicely in Game 2, however, largely thanks to Shinto's excellent Thoth play. Rongyu gets some redemption on Hercules, and a close game ends up going in favor of Sanguine to force a Game 3. Rongyu gets the Hercules again in Game 3, but he has no hope of dealing with Captain Twig's Poseidon or Final K's Cthulhu. This set was close, but in the end, Ghost's early game pressure was too much for Sanguine. But wait! There's more, and that is Radiance versus SSG was our next set. And though this normally is one of those sets you mark on your calendar, it ended up being pretty one-sided. Radiance are in one of the biggest slumps we've seen from such a talented roster, and SSG are perhaps the worst team to face, if you're not at 100%. Radiance missed quite a few weeks of SPL, but it's very surprising they missed that Aphrodite's permaband against Dardes. Yeah, you can't forget that. In Game 1, Aphro was let through, and Dardes proved exactly why it's so scary. Both side lanes got ahead, and Radiance was having trouble winning fights before the sustain even became an issue. Radiance did ban the Aphro in Game 2, and the match was much closer throughout. BMT was having a much better game when Dardes was actually killable, but Cheerio simply feasted on the other Radiance members. One bad team fight in mid, and suddenly SSG had the lead and closed the game out quickly. Woo! I need a breather. That was back-to-back. What's going on Saturday, Gore?
Well, like you said, just like that, it is on to Saturday, and our standard amount of matches, just the 2, starting off with the Renegades taking on E United even. This match had a little extra intrigue in it as well, because Variety was facing off against his former team for the first time,
right,
and Baskin with E United were on a 2-game win streak. This set had 3 games written all over it, and in that regard, it did not disappoint. E United win a wild 3-game set, 2-1. We actually saw our brightest light from the Renegades in Game 1, a lot of it surrounding Lasbra, back on a high-impact jungler in Ratatosker, and his traditional early-game duo-lane ganks. But unfortunately, there was a crumb of fall-off from Game 1 in the jungle for the Renegades as the set went on. That said, really, the story is more on how Whirlwind on Hera and Baskin on Cerberus were left unchecked as the set took a turn for the worse for the Renegades. Baskin has been loving his Cerberus almost as much as Dave loves Hera, and that's something that teams need to take into account for the future. United are really looking like a cohesive unit at this point, with mechanics and team communication feeling a bit more seamless than before. A blowout in Game 3 from everyone on E United send us on to set number 2 on Saturday with Dave.
That's right. PK come into the final set on Saturday versus Obey, knowing a win will help them crack the top 4 for the first time. Obey, who have been playing well lately, they come in equally motivated, trying to live up to the talk coming from the team. More and more sets go to 3 games these days, and this set was no exception. A close battle ends up going to the defending champs. Game 1 was basically tied for 22 minutes, then Obey overcommit trying to kill Scary in the right lane, and are stuck in an awful fight with no ults. PK clean up and move on to Game 2. Game 2 was similarly paced, but this time Obey picked better fights. Ducky and Wolfie synced up well in the late game, and it's on to Game 3. As is often the case these kinds of sets, Game 3 was a stop. Scary D got a triple kill to start the game, and he did not slow down. He and Paul lifted PK into a 2-1 victory, and with that, on to first place. That's it for Saturday. Gore, kick us off for Sunday.
Well, Dave, it's the same story, different day for Radiance, who now wander in our first set on Sunday against Ghost on a 4-game loss streak. I can't think of many worse teams to play into in need of a shot of adrenaline than Ghost. When in need of a shot of adrenaline, it helps if I read the script the right way. Or maybe a full caster 5-stack team headlined by yours truly in the support role. PBM can't hold the candle to me.
Nope.
The Radiance has had a rough go of things. They do show up against Ghost in this 3-game set, but Ghost, despite having PBM and not me, still take the win. And I will now preface this with, I have trashed PBM will bully me with Hercules, and I'm scared of it. What Radiance really needed to see was a bounce-back set for adapting in Aurora, and in Games 1 and 2, the Radiance team looked like their former selves. While Game 2 was their only win, Game 1 could have been over in 20 minutes, but Radiance showed grit in keeping the game within reach despite an awful start to the game. On the winning side of things was Sam for Soccer, time and time again, and apparently Wheelix is just a god that we need to be worried about now with this guy in the jungle. A few flashy plays highlight the day for Sam in the jungle, and it seemed like a traditional Ghost performance with a blowout finish in game number 3. While Sam had a big role in the win, Panda and Twig really showed up on Rom and Poseidon down the stretch, and Radiance were relentlessly put down. Not unlike Dave's ranked history, it's a 5-game loss streak for Radiance, but there is hope on the horizon with how Games 1 and 2 went. Ghost extend their streak to 4 wins in a row, and I'll extend the invite to Dave to take us home.
Yeah, to clear things up, the ranked history cuts off at the 5-game loss streak, not any of the hope for the future. So there was, pretty distinct gap there. But that's right, Gore. The final set of the weekend was Obey versus Sanguine, and Sanguine have been in a free fall with no parachute. Obey were trying to prevent a 3-game losing streak of their own after dropping to PK and E-United in their last 2 matches. Sanguine took no mercy, however, and quickly dispatched Obey 2-0. Shinto has been making Thoth look pretty good lately, and this matchup with Obey was no different. He drops 22,000 damage and goes 6-1 and 7, clearing the path to a Game 1 win. Then seemingly to outdo himself, he puts up an 818 KDA in game number 2. Inbound played Yamoja in both games, never looking comfortable on it. And how in the world does Yarkor keep getting Amaterasu? I have no idea. Somebody tell me why. This is Finch now speaking through Dave. I'm not even here. Then I'm losing my mind over it. I'm with you, Finch. I am too. Sanguine win this one 2-0 and finally seem to be getting back on track. That is it for week number 9 in the SPL, as written by Finch and Dave, and as told by Dave and Finch, as played by Gore here in our week number 9 recap. Gore, appreciate you standing in. Here's to watching week number 10.